Welcome. We're in chapter 2 now. We're going to be focusing on macromolecules. Macromolecules are molecules used by living things that are carbon-based. We spoke previously earlier in chapter 2 about carbon and its significance as element 6, and we know that of those 6 electrons that element 6 would have, 2 can fit into the first valence shell, and then the remaining 4 of the 6 electrons need to be placed into the second valence shell. Also recall that the second valence shell can hold up to 8 electrons. What this does is it allows carbon to form 4 separate bonds to fill up that second valence shell. As a result, carbon is very capable of making very long molecules. Those long molecules, which are carbon-based, those are called macromolecules. So there are 4 types of macromolecules. There's carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. We're going to be starting off by looking at carbohydrates. But first, we need to know what monomers and polymers are. So in this image here, we can see a chain of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different subunits. This long chain is a polymer, poly meaning many. Now if you look at the chain, each one of those 5 parts is the same, a six-sided shape. Those are all the same. Those are monomers. Monomers, mono meaning 1. So 1 part of a large structure. Carbohydrates are made up of monomers, but they form polymers, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, to start off with, reading about carbon-based molecules. All organisms are made up of 4 types of carbon-based molecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. These molecules have different structures and functions, but all are formed around carbon chains and rings. Hence the name carbon-based molecules. We need to know those are called macromolecules. Carbohydrates. Fruits and grains are in different food groups, but they both contain large amounts of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they include sugars and starches. So off the periodic table, carbon is element C, hydrogen is element H, and oxygen is element O. Carbohydrates can be broken down to provide a source of usable chemical energy for cells. Carbohydrates are also a major part of plant cell structure. The most basic carbohydrates are simple sugars or monosaccharides. Once again, mono, 1, saccharide, sugar. Many simple sugars have either 5 or 6 carbon atoms. Fruits contain a 6-carbon sugar called fructose. Glucose, one of the sugars made by plant cells during photosynthesis, is another 6-carbon sugar. Simple sugars can be bonded to make larger carbohydrates. For example, 2 sugars can be bonded together to make the disaccharide you know as the table sugar, shown in figure 2.11. Many glucose molecules can be linked to make polysaccharides, which are polymers of monosaccharides. So let's go up to the top here. Let's look at our monomer and polymer. These are actually glucose molecules. We can see an image of glucose down here, and it says that it's a 6-ringed structure. Let's look at those carbons. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons in this single molecule of glucose, which is C6H12O6. We just counted the 6 carbons. Let's check out the hydrogens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because there's that little 2 there, and 12. So there's our 12 hydrogens. And lastly, we need to count the oxygens. There should be 6 of them. Let's check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and their 6th one is actually in this ring itself. So 6 oxygens. So going back up to this image, we can see a bunch of glucose molecules, 5 to be exact. Each one of those glucose molecules is one part to the chain. So each one of those is a monomer. But when we link 5 glucose molecules together, we have a long strand, a chain of all glucose. That is a polymer. Once again, poly meaning many. All right, moving back into the text here. Starches, glycogen, and cellulose are polysaccharides. Once again, poly meaning many, saccharides meaning sugars. Starches and glycogen are similar, but they differ from cellulose because their glucose monomers are bonded together differently. Most starches are branched chains of glucose molecules. Starches are made and stored by plants, and they can be broken down as an energy source by plants and animal cells. Glycogen, which is made and stored in animals, is more highly branched than starches. Alright, so here we see an image of starch and an image of cellulose. You can see that they're slightly different. This one is more of a linear chain. We have parallel strands of it, and cellulose slightly different. It's not a parallel chain. Cellulose is somewhat different from starch and glycogen. Its straight, rigid structure, shown right up here, makes cellulose the molecule for major building block in plant cell structure. Cellulose makes up the cell wall, that is the tough outer covering of plant cells. You have eaten cellulose in the stringy fibers of vegetables such as celery, so as you know it is tough to chew and break up. So if you can picture last time you had celery, it's tough and stringy. That's because it's made up of cellulose right here. Your body cannot digest cellulose, so when we eat salads or other vegetables that contain cellulose, it's for fiber at this point, which goes through our digestive tract and makes us go to the bathroom more regularly. Alright, so let's recap carbohydrates. This would be stuff that I very strongly recommend writing down. This would be quiz and test material, as well as assignment material that you'll be using later on. So, carbohydrates recap. Keep in mind, I might go a little bit faster than you can write. You can always pause or rewind to revisit some of this information. So to recap carbohydrates, they are found in fruits and grains. So breads, pastas, fruits such as bananas, apples. Next, they contain hydrogen, which is element H on the periodic table, carbon, which is element C on the periodic table, and oxygen, which is O on the periodic table. 3. They include sugars and starches. 4. Used primarily for energy and a little for storage. 5. They are called saccharides. 6. They're made up of monomers. The monomers of carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. Once again, mono meaning one, saccharide meaning carbohydrate. An example of a monomer is glucose, and we talked about glucose and how that can link together. 8. Those monomers build polymers. The polymers of carbohydrates are called polysaccharides. And lastly, examples of polymers include cellulose, this will be for storage, starch, energy, and glycogen, also used for energy. This concludes carbohydrates. This is one of the 4 macromolecules that we need to cover in this chapter. We will be working with glucose very shortly here, and you'll be needing to recall upon all of this information, so make sure you do not lose it.